Hi, I'm Shana Meyerson with the Yoga of War podcast, here today with three-time return guest. Wait, would you be a three-time return guest or a two-time return guest because the first time you didn't return?
It's like being the second runner-up. Is that third place or not? No.
Whatever it is, here for the third time, legal scholar, novelist, and social commentator, Thane Rosenbaum. If you appreciate and find value in these important discussions, please consider supporting the show. Your donations ensure that I can continue to bring you such amazing and esteemed guests. Detailed are pinned in the comments below. So, people love dead Jews. Dead Jews may have been murdered or massacred or burnt alive or gassed, or the list goes on. Name the thing. But we all know that dead Jews deserve our sympathy for hours or even days. But that's really about the upper limit. Ultimately, the problem with dead Jews is that in this day and age, Jews are not actually allowed to be victims. They can only be aggressors. Jews are not allowed to be the oppressed, only the oppressors. Even when, in actuality, the Jewish people are by far the most oppressed and victimized group in history. But that doesn't fit the narrative. That is so uncomfortable because the thing that makes the Jews different is that we don't wallow in our victimhood. We transcend it and climb to incredible heights, shattering the pervasive oppressor-oppressed paradigm that is so very du jour these days. There's one easy way to fix that, especially in the information age: rewrite history. Rewrite and revise until the victim becomes the aggressor. The oppressed becomes the oppressor. Then everything will be all right in the world. Or will it? There are a lot of people right now raising red flags over the onslaught of lies and propaganda that have overtaken any semblance of global morality or intelligence, but I don't believe enough is being paid to its implications for the future. Today, Thane Rosenbaum and I will discuss the phenomenon and dangers of revisionist history, even as it's being rewritten before our very eyes. Thane, thank you for returning for the third time, or being here for the third time, returning for the second time. You could do the math. Thank you for showing up.
Sean, I find it almost nearly impossible to say no to you. So you are very charming, and you have a very nice podcast, and you ask important questions, and your heart is always in the right place. And there's a kind of righteousness about your program and your spirit. And so how could someone say no?
Wow. Thank you. You always flatter and humble me. Okay. I'm blushing. Okay, Thane, I'd like to start today's conversation with Zoran Mamdani, whose very deliberate inversion and deflection of reality once again weaponized the theory of Islamophobia, this time for political gain. Never mind that after 9/11, anti-Semitic hate crime spiked at a much faster rate than anti-Muslim hate crime. And never mind that the Jewish people actually had literally nothing to do with the heinous Islamic terrorist attack on America on 9/11. Thane, in your opinion, how does this strategy of hijacking and mitigating not just the story, but the lessons of the story, how does this help to undermine the real and devastatingly tragic victims of September 11th?
Well, here's a strange thing that is totally mystifying to me. For all of the talk about Islamophobia, well, first of all, even in the halls of Congress, whenever anyone suggests that there a resolution be passed to reflect a condemnation of anti-Semitism, invariably a large segment of the members of the House say, yes, but we have to also add Islamophobia. And then you say, yeah, but where's this Islamophobia? Where are Muslims getting attacked outside of mosques? Where is that? Where are people being beaten up? Where are there people chanting outside, death to Muslims? Or, where do you see anything that's comparable to what's happening with Jews? So when you said Jews don't count, that's a very good example that even when there's some talk of let's acknowledge and condemn anti-Semitism, it can't be done without also acknowledging the same condemnation of Islamophobia, when in fact, I don't see it. I don't think the statistics, whether it's the ADL or the FBI, whoever's keeping the statistics, when you consider a disproportionate number of hate crimes committed against Jews and the relatively fewer ones when you think about the large number of Muslims in the United States. And you invoke the magic numbers, 9/11. I find it utterly shocking and a real statement about our country, the United States, that after 9/11 and after some of our own people were beheaded, businessmen, contractors were beheaded by ISIS in a public showing of rituals of beheadings. Americans were killed in the Nova Music Festival. So it's not just American Jews, it's American Christians have been victimized by Islamists. The fact that you see in Europe the incredible amounts of terrorist activity taking place, mostly in Paris until recently, but now we're seeing in London. You know that in Germany, for the last 5 years, there are the Christmas festival rammings. Most people don't know about this. In Christmas, over the last number of years, throughout many cities in Germany, Munich particularly for some reason, but a number of cities, an Islamist takes a car, and they always have these outdoor festivals. I've been to them; they're lovely. I've been to them mostly in Cologne and in Berlin. The Germans really put on these outdoor festivals, and an Islamist takes a car and rams into them. They're not even Jews in there per se. They're Christmas festivals. And you think the Germans took in more Syrian refugees than any other country in Europe. And there is a lot of buyer's remorse. But we know this is happening all over the world. We know there are beheadings, slitting of throats, Christmas tree rammings. We know that in London, there was a car with this megaphone that said, rape Jewish daughters, rape Jewish daughters. You would think there would be more condemnation of Islam. You would think that people would say, what is with this book, the Quran? What is this with the prophet who's also a general? What is it about a religion that is also a political ideology that is bent on world conquest? What the hell is going on here? Now, you heard me say that, but you're not going to hear that on any media, mainstream media. I've been saying it for years. But of course, I must be an Islamophobe, because you can't, in our culture, you can't point out unflattering things about people of color without being a racist or an Islamophobe. You can't even mention truths. Doesn't make a difference. The mere fact that you're mentioning it that suggests something unflattering to people of color, which means what we've been told as part of the world of woke critical race theory is that people of color have automatic virtue, and people who are white are part of this Western colonial moral condemnation that's deserving of all white people. It applies to all white people because of what they've done to people of color. So that you cannot deviate from the script of people of color have automatic virtue, and people who are white are automatically morally depraved beyond the pale. And so I always think it's sort of extraordinary when you think about what you see in the world, and even in the United States. It was just a few weeks ago, so I don't think I said this on your show, but if I did, tell me to say stop, you told us. It was only a few weeks ago that the mayor of Dearborn hosted did I mention it then? I don't know if I did.
Yes, but you could give the brief because it's important.
The brief is that the Muslim population is the majority population in Dearborn. Both the mayor and the entire city council are entirely Muslim. They renamed the street recently in honor of a Hezbollah terrorist. A Christian cleric, I don't know if he was a minister or a reverend or a pastor, but he was a Christian cleric, wasn't a priest, got up at one of the meetings and said, he's Christian now. And he said, I'm not comfortable as a taxpayer in Dearborn having subsidized and paid for street naming honoring a Hezbollah terrorist. And by the way, even if I wasn't paying through my tax dollars, I don't know why we're honoring terrorists. And the mayor's
Which is
response
a
was
fair point to
a
make
very
in
fair
any
point.
civilization.
Even if some private donor came by and said, you know what, no out-of-pocket costs to the city. I love terrorists. I'm an Islamist. Terrorists are my favorite people, more favorite than any other person. And so I want to name this street for him. Can we vote on that? And I'll foot the bill. And so the cleric made this point, this Christian man, and the mayor responded, and you can look this up. There's video of this. He said, I just want to say that you are not welcome to live in this city. And in it, if and when you move, I hope you do, I will host a parade in honor of your departure. And I'm thinking, people around the country don't know that this just happened. Imagine if a Jewish community with Jewish mayor and city councilman said that to an African American or to an Arab. Imagine what would happen if I've said, you're not welcome in our city and we will throw a parade when we kick you out. So I'm saying that I find it just remarkable, the lack, the sense of restraint. This not just restraint, but I would call it largely intimidation, because, you know, Muslims will blow themselves up. They'll blow up buildings. Yep. They'll set fire to things. And so I don't know whether it is an extreme level of cultural and moral relativism. I don't know whether it is an incredible sensitivity to political correctness, but you almost never hear what I just said.
Right.
You never hear someone say, you know, given the amount of violence committed in the name of Allah, you would think more people would have real objections to the religion of peace that actually is responsible for all of this violence.
Exactly. And when we see these false equivalencies between, and by the way, during Black Lives Matter, the most offensive thing that you could possibly say was all lives matter. And yet nobody can utter the word anti-Semitism without, as you say, the corollary of Islamophobia. And also, Thane, I know you know this, but for people who don't know, the very word Islamophobia was created by the Muslims to shut down all criticism of Islam. That's why it was actually created. And we have to understand also that when we say that we want to put anti-Semitism on par with Islamophobia, who are the victims and who are the perpetrators? Like, so if we are having anger against radical Islam that has no compunction about blowing up New York City, like who ever saw like a rabbi on a plane and said, oh shit, a rabbi, we're in trouble? And so it just goes back to this utter inversion that knows no bounds. Year after year, more than 50% of all religious hate crime in America is against Jews. And that figure is only rising. In fact, surging since October 7th, which is mind-boggling in and of itself. Since the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, we decided this would be the good time to jump on the Jews. Even as Jews are being targeted, bullied, attacked, and even murdered in our streets, we have these Muslims crying over their manufactured Islamophobia crisis. Is what we're seeing like just simply the race to the bottom in the oppression Olympics that have become such a popular event? Or is it something far darker and completely dismissive of the very real persecution being faced every day by diaspora Jews?
So I have three things to add to what you just said, and then I'll try to answer the question. The first thing is that, you know, Muslims may have created the term of art Islamophobia, but they shouldn't have created that word, because if you look at the word in its meaning, it should mean the fear of Muslims.
That's right.
Phobia. They think it means the irrational hatred of Muslims. And I would say, well, first of all, I don't know if the word irrational is the right word, because the violence is being committed by Muslims, so it's not irrational. It's irrational to fear, religious Jews who don't attack people. That would be irrational. But to simply say it's irrational, Juan Williams, the commentator who's African American, was fired from NPR, not surprisingly, when he was on a different radio show, not NPR, being interviewed. And somebody said something about, well, how do you feel after 9/11 when you see, Muslims dressed in religious clothing? And he said, well, I have to admit, when I'm on a plane and Muslims dressed in religious garb, he used the word garb, look into the what is the case above your seat? I don't know what that's called. Your suitcase go.
Overhead compartment. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever that's called. When you see them open it up, I always get scared. He said that, and he got fired for saying that. Instead of saying, whoa, wait a minute. Plane destructions, you said 50% of all hate crimes are committed against Jews, but the number that you didn't give me, because I don't know if we keep track of that number, it must be 80% of those crimes are committed by Muslims. Certainly in Europe, it's probably 90%. In the United States, I don't know what the number is, but I don't know what it is. But I can assure you the number committed by Muslims is greater than 50%.
Well, let me tell you, Thane, there's a reason why they don't keep those statistics.
Yes, for that reason. Yeah. And in Europe, it's almost automatic. If a Jew is being attacked, it is by a Muslim who came to Europe and decided I'm importing my hatred, my Islamic hatred of Jews. And I don't like anything that they do here in liberal democracies. And one thing I don't do is they seem to want to protect Jews, and I don't want to protect Jews. So in Europe, it's automatic. So yes, I think phobia is the right word, not because of hatred, because of fear.
Right.
And the fear is not a rational fear. Stop cutting off heads. Here's a thought. Stop beheading people. I know this is impossible for you, but your people need to stop beheading people and claiming it's merely a cultural difference. It's just a moral, relativistically different thing. You like this, we like that. And instead of saying, until such time is you don't blow up planes, you don't kidnap cruise liners, you don't assassinate an Olympic team, you don't kill a United States Senator, Robert Kennedy, until that violence dissipates significantly, we are going to have a fear if we see you. And that is not irrational. That is just something that you've put in our mind because you can't seem to live in peace with other people.
So they've shut down the conversation, Thane, but do you think these people I just had a yoga person come attack me today again for Islamophobia. Do they really believe this? Do they honestly not understand there's a threat there, or are they just unwilling to admit it? By the way, Thane, did you see, and this is relevant, not just because I care whether you saw it or not, that there was this Swedish, I don't know what terrorist sympathizer, I don't know what to call it, like a government official, parliamentarian or whatever, that just got beheaded, and not in Sweden, but in wherever, some Muslim country. It doesn't even make the news anymore because we become so desensitized. Oh, like you said, that's just what they do. I love how you said it in the last show. Some people like cheese. We like cutting off heads, but we are is this just acceptable now that it's not even newsworthy anymore?
Well, there's a reflexive impulse, and that's the yoga person, no doubt, who attacked you today, to say, I was trained to like all people and to believe that all people are essentially good. So I wrote a book, The Myth, Payback, the Case for Revenge. And I challenged that idea. Because I am not someone, I said in the book, The Case for Revenge, I said, I think in crimes that are considered the worst of the worst, where it's obvious what happened, there's no DNA evidence that's going to show that the person was innocent. The heinous crimes, the death penalty is not only totally legally appropriate, but morally appropriate. And I said, I don't believe in people who say all human lives are of equal value. I think that's utter preposterous. I know the person who says that. I'm sure the imbecile who wrote to you this morning, she's got to be an imbecile. And I hope she watches this. I hope he watches this. You're an imbecile. I'm sure he was appalled by what I just said because he's going, no, all people have value. No, I do not think that Charles Manson and Martin Luther King are of equal value. No, I do not think that Abraham Lincoln and Adolf Hitler have equal value. No, I don't. I'm able to, unlike moral relativists who said, who's to say? Who's to say? You like this, we like this. I don't want to be arrogant and tell you not to cut off heads. I like my own things. I have my own quirks. I cut my toenails at the table. You can cut off heads. I cut toenails. We're equally different in our moral understanding of the universe.
And as long as it's cultural,
it's a cultural difference. And so we're taught to think that all people are essentially good, and you give everybody, the benefit of the doubt, and they're all good people. Now, the people that normally say that live in suburbs, or they live in Park Avenue apartments with doormen. They don't live in the Middle East. They don't live in a world where people actually behead people. So, for instance, I used to have an agent that I fired after 30 years because she didn't want to represent this most recent book. And one of the things she said was, well, in the book, you say that Palestinians value lives less than Jews do. Right. And I said, no, they say that. Yes, it's true, but they admit that. They say that. But she was just, she's no genius. I hope she's watching this, and she really was troubled. She was probably worried about the other clients that would be appalled, so she ditched, she didn't want to represent this book, and I fired her. Yeah. And I spoke at her husband's funeral just to show you how deep this is, that someone would actually, not represent this book because they don't want to seem like I'm in favor of killing brown-skinned people. And I'm saying, no, you should be in favor of understanding that brown-skinned people will get killed when they attack and behead babies, gang rape girls, behead Holocaust survivors. You should expect that that's going to happen to them without crying, oh my God, you killed a brown-skinned person. Yeah, we killed a brown-skinned savage barbarian that invaded our country. Remember, October 7th, Shana, is not Pearl Harbor. There was no attack on Israeli ships, Israeli servicemen, down destroying airfields of jet fighter. They were attacking people at a rock concert. And the person who's your yoga person, the imbecile that I mentioned before, please watch this. He should be calling you and saying, I'm a yoga person, so I'm pretty sympathetic to the people that were at the Nova Music Festival. I probably would have been there. They're just listening to music. They're kids. Yeah. And I can't believe that kids were killed and boyfriends were forced to watch their girlfriend's gang rape. He's defending that. Yeah. This imbecile is defending that in order to, why? Because he wants to show you in social media that he's morally superior to you because you are an Islamophobe and he is a wonderful person that nothing bad has ever happened to. So he's in a very good position to criticize a country that needs to defend itself against barbarians. Exactly. It's, I don't know, all I can say is that we are very ingrained. I don't know if you ever saw I always mention this because he lost me at this moment. I used to like Ben Affleck until I watched him on that show.
We talked about this last time also.
Okay, so I bring this up a lot because I was so embarrassed for him. I thought, what a moron. You're even dumber than the guy from the yoga studio who attacked Sean. How stupid are you? No wonder Jennifer Garner would divorce you. It's not the alcoholism. You're just stupid that you had a meltdown because you could not accept the fact that while there may be 1.8 billion Muslims in the world, over 1 billion of them believed in a strict adherence to Sharia law. That means they believe in beheadings and dismemberments and lashings and punishments and child rape. They believe in all of this. They believe in public lying because it's perfectly correct under the hadith of the Quran. So, that was irreparably Islamophobic and racist. Yep. And when Islam is not a race, it's a religion, you moron. And two, Mr. Affleck or Ben, you have to account for the fact that there's 1 billion people that believe in beheadings, that believe in lashing. They may not do it themselves, but they believe that some people deserve it and it's a legitimate thing to do. And so that's what Sam Harris and Bill Maher were talking about. Yeah. Your impulse to jump at the thought that white people are criticizing people of color, of any color, is so charged that you melted down on national television instead of saying, I just want to make sure that everyone knows it's not all 1.8. And Sam Harris and Bill Maher said, of course it's not all 1.8. Yeah. Everybody knows that. Even an imbecile like you knows that, Ben Affleck.
Yeah. I believe that it was Sam Harris who had like a 20-minute argument with somebody that it was Muslims who do suicide bombings, most of the suicide bombings in the world, which isn't undeniable
Isn't it
20
almost
minutes
all?
that this person had to defend it and say, oh no, like Christians are just as bad and Jews are just as bad. I'm like, really? Let's go down the list. The amazing thing is that if you go down the list of designated terrorist organizations by the anti-Semitic United Nations, by the terrorist defending United Nations, still every single one of them happens to be Islamic. So let's connect.
But if you say that, you're an Islamophobe, and that's the problem. It's a reflex. It's an impulse.
Yeah.
And it's an impulse that's based on virtue signaling.
Yeah.
It's based on moral superiority. Yes. I am an excellent, my agent thought that. I am such a good person because I live on Park Avenue and I believe that everyone is like my neighbors on Park Avenue. And I go, well, really? You really need to get out more. You need to travel more. You need to read more since you're a literary agent. How do you not know that most people are not the same people that your neighbors in Park Avenue? And there are people in the world that are actually having to face these people.
Yeah.
And yes, people blow themselves up, and Muslims tell you that there is honor in being a martyr, and that Jews are too fixated on life. So don't blame Thane Rosenbaum for repeating what they said.
That's right.
What they said is so appalling to you that you're blaming the person that's simply quoting them.
Exactly.
And again, this is beyond her capacity. Good riddance to her. But this is, I've seen this a lot. That's why I gave you that personal anecdote about a former agent, a person I knew for 30 years, who I spoke at her husband's funeral. And when it came to this, she could not bear this. This was unbearable to even have the conversation about the legitimacy of Israel's war in Gaza, both militarily and legally and morally.
But this is also, I mean, this is how indoctrination works. I mean, what we're really witnessing right now is global brainwashing, that the only reason that I believe this didn't happen in 1939 is because we didn't have the internet. I'm going to go ahead and argue that the October 7th jihadi campaign was never about the massacre, but the culmination of a decades-long brewing strategy to delegitimize not just the Jewish state, but the Jewish people as a whole, and it's working. The anti-Israel riots that exploded as early, I know everyone's saying October 8th, they were happening on October 7th, and they were a direct corollary to Hamas's deliberate provocation to draw inevitable, time-tested global condemnation against Israel's pending, hadn't even happened, military response. The predictable result was this frog boiling metamorphosis from anti-Israel to anti-Zionist to now, like, explicitly and unapologetically anti-Jewish rhetoric from both the Islamists and their band of useful idiots, your agent and my yoga friend included in that. They're useful because they're doing the terrorist bidding for them, and they're idiots because they honestly seem to think that calling for intifada is just singing Kumbaya in Arabic. What do you think was the primary goal of Hamas's attack on October 7th? And how do you think their success, if you agree that the primary goal was the discreditation rather than the massacre, maybe you think it was the massacre, they're both valid ideas, but how will their success be measured in light of the current peace deal?
Well, I think their strategy has been longstanding, as you said, and it's a strategy that was designed, helped by Qatar infiltrating all the universities with Islamists. And the
Mm-hmm.
marriage between Islamists and Marxists was a perfect storm. And the perfect storm was what? To make the West hate itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually brilliant. For 1,500 years, Europe was holding back Muslims from attacking, whether it's the Crusades or the Turks, the Ottomans, right? They were always fighting them. I remember I was in Poland a few years ago, and there was this incredible painting there, and you can actually see Middle Ages, 16th century Poland fighting against Islamists. You can see they have the swords. You can see what they're doing. This 1500s. It's just crazy that they were always fighting against the caliphate, the idea of world domination that Islam wanted to impose on the rest of the world. And Islam came up with a brilliant method, which is, as long as you're letting our people live there, we'll fuck you up from the inside. We don't need a sword. Don't need it.
Mm-hmm.
We will manipulate you into your own self-hatred, into your own anti-Western, racist, colonial guilt, that you will always blame yourself first instead of us. You will always look upon us as the victims, and you will see yourself as the oppressors. Now, this wasn't done overnight. It took decades to achieve, but they succeeded. And I think that October 7th was that day. It was like the bell went off. And now all of a sudden, it was possible to speak openly about this. People were saying it in classrooms. They were doing it in universities. Israel Apartheid Week. You saw small things, shouting down some speakers. Didn't get much attention. I was one of those speakers. For 15 years, I was shouted down at a number of places. But it was not in the public's eye.
Mm-hmm.
It was mostly confined to university. And I stupidly once spoke, I forget which university in Israel, and I'm often wrong. So I was wrong again. I said, I think that what we're seeing, the divestment and what is it again?
BDS. Boycott, divestment,
boycott, divestment, and right. That the BDS movement and sanctions was really confined to the shitty American universities, Cal State, Fullerton. It was like a common thing. It wasn't considered. I'm sure I just offended somebody from Cal. Not even the UC schools. You saw it in second ranked, third ranked schools. So then now look how wrong I was. Yeah. The campus and campus was all Ivy League and Berkeley and UCLA. I was the exact opposite of what I said. That actually Qatar actually invested more money in the Ivy League and filled their ranks with more anti-Western, self-hating people who would be able to impose Marxists who could teach this kind of critical theory of Herman Marcuse, and Islamists who are there basically, as Marco Rubio said, if you're here in the United States basically to put on a mask and chase Jews around, then you need to go. Yeah. Because you've proven you don't really belong here. If that's your whole purpose. But that was the purpose of a lot of people that came to the United States on student visas or were here as visiting lecturers at universities. And their purpose was what? To hate Israel, to introduce anti-Zionist thinking within the universities, and to make the Western universities hate themselves and blame themselves for all the sins in the world committed against people that are brown-skinned. And so that was a very successful strategy that when it was publicly expressed was usually condemned. So here's the irony. Well, the mentor for Mamdani, Zoran Mamdani, is Linda Sarsour. Right. Linda Sarsour, who was an avowed Islamist, said a lot of things that got her kicked out of polite circles, out of polite society. Now what she's saying is being said by the candidate for the very likely the next mayor of New York. Right. She was able to say it in hushed tones. When she spoke of it openly, she was condemned. But Mamdani and his crew have openly stated Israel is a genocidal state. It's an apartheid state. It has no right to exist as a Jewish state. The New York Police Department are being trained by the Israelis to hate Black people, right? These things that were being said, boot on the necks of the Black people is the boot of the Israelis. This kind of stuff only really existed in very, very sort of private progressive tea parties, where they're by themselves, or on university campuses, and not all universities. But what we're seeing after October 7th is an explosion, a complete, openness of this kind of rhetoric that before then. So I don't know if you remember Ilhan Omar. She remember once said about 9/11, some people did some bad things.
Yeah.
And she was castigated for that but that's exactly what many Muslims think, that, whatever happened on 9/11 was deserved.
Yeah.
Do you know who also thought that? Barack Obama's personal private pastor, Reverend Wright. The chickens are coming home to roost. There's way too many people living in this country that believe that the United States deserved 9/11 and that Israel deserved 10/7. And they have said it privately, and now they're sort of saying it openly. And you know where the language for that came from? Shortly after 10/7, we saw Gutierrez from the United Nations. It didn't just happen in a vacuum.
Sure.
Remember that? The presidents of universities, it's context related. What do those words mean? It means you can't really condemn what happened on 10/7 because you can understand why that happened. You can understand why people hate Jews. Mm-hmm. You can understand why people hate Americans. And there are far too many people living in the United States who believe that, that the West deserves whatever they get, Jews deserve whatever they get. Before this, we only could say it to ourselves, but now we've been invited to say it openly.
And that's just a very long way of saying we've boiled the frog. I mean, I could tell you, as one of the worst cooks in the world, A, it's true that a watch pot never boils, but B, once it boils, if you're me in my kitchen, it boils over everywhere. And I feel like that's exactly what happened. And I'll tell you something funny, actually, not funny, but about a dozen years ago, I actually wrote a report about the impending BDS crisis for a prominent Jewish organization that I'm heavily involved in. And they told me it wasn't really an issue, and that they did not want me to focus on that. So I was raising the flag on this a long time ago because if you actually look into the history of the campus BDS movement, it actually started in the 80s or the 90s. And what they did was, for 10 or 20 years, all they did was create allyship, nothing else. Just, we stand with everyone. If you're Black, we stand with you. If you're Hispanic, we stand with you.
And
if you're gay, we stand with you.
That eventually became the word intersectionality.
Right.
That eventually became, not at that time, but that's what stood out, ultimately manifested itself as that.
But after they became allied to everyone, they're like, and we have this one tiny ask decades later, which is ironic because the Jews have always allied with all of these groups, have always allied with every civil rights cause and every civil action. But because this brown group came out of nowhere, then all of a sudden they asked for this one little ask, and the useful idiots are like, sure, yeah, let's kill Israel. We're on board. They didn't know what it meant. That's what kids do. But I want to ask you, because I really do want to get into this historical revisionism, because we're already 40 minutes in and we've touched upon it. But before we get into the rewriting of history, I want to ask you two questions that really do go together. The first one is, in the grand scheme of Jewish history, how important do you think October 7th is and will continue to be into the future? And do you think that people, and particularly Jewish people, understand the true gravity of this moment?
I think it's possibly the most important date in all of Jewish history, because
okay,
I really do. I think it's hard to, you say that it deserves a wow. Why would, that's a big statement. But I do think when we look back on it, not today, not tomorrow, but years from now, we will see that it was very much a dividing line, because it was much more inexplicable what took place, right? So for instance, For 2,000 years, the world got used to saying, well, Jews kill Christian children and make matzah out of their blood. And people believed that. Most of the people were peasants, illiterates, didn't read, didn't know anything. They also thought Jews had horns. And so there was also no television, there was no cable, there was no internet, there was no photography. So I can see how you go from one village to the next and tell people about Jews, and they're going, oh my God, they have horns? And, there's no, they might believe it. So for 2,000 years, it was easy to believe. Again, most people were not educated. Most people didn't know how to read. Most people were just listened to gossip and just repeated the lie. So for 2,000 years, you can understand Christian anti-Semitism or even racially Jewish anti-Semitism, that Jews are an infected species, an inferior race, and they must be kept away from our pure master race. But in the year 2023, right? In the year 2023, for you to be able to look at a country fighting a war in self-defense and call it genocide, and have scholars of genocide, call it genocide, and that no one's having an honest conversation about what happened on October 7th. And so that people literally are walking around with full knowledge of what's happened. People with PhDs in subjects that know what the definition is. They know it's a specific intent. I'm sure I said it on your show. Genocide is specific intent to kill a people in whole or in part. The minute Israel opened the first humanitarian corridor, that's over. That discussion it's not genocide. If you have a humanitarian corridor, you can't have a genocide. If you're giving people precautionary warnings to leave the area because the next day that's not genocide. If you're warning people, right? If you're allowing trucks that come in that supply food, that's not even a siege warfare. So if you're trying to make distinctions between terrorists and non-terrorists, but you can't because the terrorists are fighting next to, but you are trying to struggle with what is the precise bomb that we can use in this instance, it's not genocide, because genocide would say the most efficient way to kill the most people is what we're going with, right? So the fact that all of that was obvious that Israel wasn't doing, and the world was screaming, a mayoral candidate is still saying genocide. Everyone's using the word genocide, and it's so obviously not genocide. So you don't even have the benefit of illiteracy, lack of information, impossible ways to verify things. Everything is available. Every night you can see stuff. The media doesn't publish most of it, but you can see it, you can read about it, you can hear it, you can see. We know we can do now, we have medical examiners that can examine, yes, that girl was gang raped. Yes, this head was beheaded, right? We know how it was done. We know where it was done. We can see from that the boyfriend was next door, next watching, and he was likely killed after. Medical examiners are able to do that now. So that only makes me think 10/7 sends a really strong message. And Jews are not just pushcart sellers in Montreal and in Lower East Side, or struggling haberdashers in Los Angeles before they started making movies, but Jews are involved in all kinds of industries. So they're not a mysterious group. Everybody knows Jews. This is not like their own by themselves, an insular group of religious people. Most Jews are secular. Most Jews live in secular cosmopolitan society. We know them. So we know they're not baby killers. We know not to go up to Jews on the street in Los Angeles and say, baby killer, because wait a minute, this person is a script writer for Friends. It's not a baby killer. That's not on his 1040. It doesn't say baby killer. It says he's a script writer. So that person is not killing babies. You don't even know you don't even know if that person has even been to Israel. The odds are he hasn't. And yet you're screaming baby killer to him. This is what's so extraordinary about 10/7, right? That with full knowledge of people, their habits, their professional activities, who they are as people, your capacity to know about them and more to know information that's immediate, right? The Dreyfus Affair was covered in the United States by newspapers. And people in the Wild West were reading about the Dreyfus Affair and saying, wow, they're disloyal and they backstab the French people. But today, that news travels way immediate. And yet, with all of that background, this gives you a sense of how really easy it is and how latent and dormant is anti-Semitism. It gives you a sense of the power of it because it really puts the lie to, well, if you study the Holocaust, those people who study the Holocaust will never say stupid things about Jews again. They will know Jews are victims. And now we've done the opposite. For all the talk about the Holocaust, we have used the Holocaust against the Jews.
Yeah,
we have said the worst crime against you, you have now learned the lessons of the Nazis and you're doing it against brown-skinned people. So you're saying, well, what was the point of educating the world about the Holocaust if it would end up backfiring against Jews? Because it would be used against them as if, you see, you learned this, or whatever happened to you wasn't as bad as what you're doing to the Palestinians. So that's why I think this date is so extraordinary. Because Jews, I think, I'm not sure I was one of them, because I have a dark cloud all the time. I don't not have sanguine, up feelings. I always go, this may very well happen.
Yeah.
But I think Jews could easily look at someone like me and say, you're hysteric, you're a lunatic, you're overly sensitive, you're like a hypochondriac, you're filled with anxiety, you don't really live in the real world. The real world, nothing like this can happen. And now I think a lot of people on Wall Street and in Hollywood are shocked, saying, Jesus, we've been in, and look at, Hollywood is a very good example with that Hollywood museum that erased the Jewish founders of the studio system.
And this was years ago, for anybody who doesn't know.
Yes, this was
probably 10
how did
ago
that happen? And that goes to this concept of erasure.
Yeah.
That we simply erase anything that was bad that happened to Jews and erase any accomplishments of Jews. Yeah. So that you could actually, in Los Angeles, have a museum dedicated to the creation of Hollywood and not have any mention at all that 4 of the 6 studio heads were Jews, 3 of whom were born in Europe.
Yeah.
That you won't know that. So anyway, that's why I think that this date is so significant, because I think that, I'm not saying Jews will not be deluded in the future. They're still deluded. They're voting for Magnami. There's still Jews saying Israel committed Jewish genocide. So even with everything that I just said, Jews are still stupid, plenty of them, right? And far too many. I'm very happy to pull a Ben Affleck on your show.
Yeah.
Because this is, the fact that Jews would be voting for Mandami is shocking. The fact that Jews are actually in Hollywood supporting Mark Ruffalo, or the various numbers, or, like Emma Stone. I mean, people that have never read books, never went to college, are utter imbeciles who don't know. They're just demonstrating their inner Jew hatred. There's no other explanation.
I've seen so many, actually, Thane, brilliant explanations. The problem is that I think that's just a lot of rational people trying to rationalize the irrational. And it doesn't change anything. It doesn't move the needle to say, like, psychologically or sociologically speaking, this is why people are, engaging in a certain phenomenon. Now, in 2025.
Do you really think so? I don't know about that. Why would they do that? Why wouldn't they say, my own life is at risk? Instead of saying, I'm trying to make sense of the irrational, why aren't they saying instead, this is a warning shot to me that I as a Jew should be very careful because people don't have my back?
Oh, I agree. No, what I mean is that there are people like you or Brendan O'Neill or Einat Wilf who have brilliant explanations for this moment. The problem is that beyond my own bubble of comfort and safety, that I could go to bed at night and say, wow, the way that they explain this makes so much sense. Now I can sleep. And then I wake up and open social media. I'm like, never mind. But but going back to, because there's so many people in this world, of course, for obvious reasons, who are drawing parallels between the Holocaust and 10/7. Obviously, they're such dramatically different events. There's parallels in perhaps the hatred in the level of violent anti-Semitism that went into each. But again, I want to focus a little bit more on how we're trying to change, not we, how people are trying to change the narrative. Because in 2025, we're watching the Holocaust being erased in front of our very eyes. And as you mentioned, like, Holocaust deniers are now tenured professors. They're cult-like influencers in the world leaders. But it took a number of decades for this phenomenon to really take hold. I mean, fast forward.
But it was always there. I think that's the point. That's the point I'm trying to make. That I think it was always latent. It was latent and dormant. That if you could give me an opportunity to deny the Holocaust with a straight face, I'll do it.
Really? Because I would think that the effort to deny history would be seen as an impossibility before communications became so broad in so easily circumventing the globe within seconds, that there was so much information. I mentioned to you in the last show that when I saw Elie Wiesel in the 80s, and he said that he had no fear of anybody of the world forgetting the Holocaust because it was the most documented event in modern history. It really did take a number of decades for the denialism phenomenon to take hold. I'm not saying there was nobody doing it, but for it to really become a thing. I remember when I was at Cornell my senior year, this guy, Bradley Smith, I think was his name, took out a full-page advertorial denying the Holocaust in the Cornell Daily Sun, which, of course, Cornell Daily Sun made news again last week for posting this horrific cartoon of like a Nazi/Jewish tattoo on a person. Hail all hail Cornell, or as I say, hail all hail Cornell. But that was the first time I ever, and granted, I was young. What was I, 20 years old, ever saw Holocaust denialism. And it shook the whole campus to the core. I have to say, there was a big protest against it. I didn't see a single person trying to defend it, and it became like a thing. So this is 1992, so it was definitely a different.
Yeah, but he was a quack.
Anybody who denies the Holocaust is a quack. Okay, because the Holocaust, 6 million people were murdered.
Yeah, but they're denying it today in a different way. They're trivializing it. They're diminishing the number. They're trying to explain, I'm just saying that I know what you're saying. You're saying that didn't catch on. And I'm saying that's because that guy wasn't even an academic. He was a clown who took out an ad. And so, it was only creepy neo-Nazis that said things like this.
Right.
The difference now is that the hatred of Jews emanates out of intellectual circles. That's what makes this like the Dreyfus affair, because the Holocaust denial was always by right-wing neo-Nazi sympathizers. These were not people with PhDs. And so, of course, it didn't take root on campuses. But now it's mutated out of campuses because it emanates from Middle East studies, African American studies, African studies, indigenous literature studies, feminist studies, gender studies, queer studies.
Anything with studies.
Anything with studies that's not really a major and that you won't get a job if you're in. Those things are paid for by Arab Qatar money, Saudi Gulf money. And that's what made it different. It legitimized the Jew hatred as a human rights, social activist, social justice concern. What you're describing to me in Cornell has nothing in common with that's something that would never take hold, because it would be embarrassing to stand next to Bradley Smith. It would be embarrassing to identify with Frank Collins or David Duke and the Klan. No legitimate Cornell student would do that. Nobody at Ivy League or any school, people, who I don't know where, I forgot where he's from. Oh, Louisiana. David Duke was from Louisiana. I'm sure there were very few people at LSU that identified with David Duke. But here you have the professors teaching you to hate Jews. They're teaching you to hate Israel. They're giving a syllabus in which the whole thing is how Israelis poison water, Israelis mine harvest organs, Israeli soldiers fire deliberately at the limbs of Arab children. It's in the syllabus. Right. So it's harder. And the parents, Jewish parents, are too stupid to ask their children what they were learning. So they don't even know what the kid is coming home, study. I just took an exam. I got an A. And in order to get an A, I had to say Jews are the worst people in the world. That's very nice. It's good to get an A. And so that's what really happened here. That's been happening for years. Yeah. This has been percolating for years, but it was blown open because of what happened on 10/7. Two things happened. One, the haters of Jews in Israel needed to get busy to try to cover up the barbarism. Even in my book, I even talk about that. Yahya Sinwar even said, one of his quotes is, the people got carried away. Like even he was surprised by the beheadings and the gang raping. He was surprised. So it put sympathizers to the Islamist cause on a defensive that they immediately went into action by doing what? Tearing down posters, right? Immediately screaming genocide. Immediately using words like, it's not in a vacuum, it's based on context, there's a long history. A way to sort of gloss over, oh, here's the other one, my personal, by any means necessary. That term of art was used. Why? You use it because you have to be able to explain, why would we burn babies? Why would we behead people? Why would we gang rape girls? They're not carrying guns. They just were in a rock concert. So a lot of work went in immediately to gloss over the obvious, overt, and as you would say, easily, instantaneously known. Remember, immediately we were told there were no rapes. That's a lie. Show me the proof. There were no beheadings. Show me the proof. There were no burned babies. Show me the proof. People did that immediately. It's why? Because they were in a bad spot. They hated Jews. They saw an opening here. And that combination of latent anti-Semitism that was mutating on college campuses and within progressive circles was given an invitation to go mainstream after 10/7. And part of that was that part of the mainstream was to excuse what happened on that day. Excuse what happened, explain it away as justifiable, and then move on to blame the Israelis for whatever they're about to do.
Yeah. So in light of all that, in the fact that even as grandmas were being murdered via live stream on their own Facebook pages, people across the globe were already, even as they're watching them, denying the atrocities and blaming the Jews for their own massacre. But there's a particularly perverted irony to people who are simultaneously denying and celebrating the same exact atrocities. But seeing as this erasure apparatus, hold on one second, was in place, even as the atrocities were unfolding, I'm curious what you think our history books are going to say in 10 or 20 or 50 years.
So first of all, what you said before, the irreconcilability, how can it be this and this? How can it be, it didn't happen and yet, yay, it happened, right? It didn't happen, but yay, I'm so happy it happened. The Nazis did very similar things. They said, the Jews are all powerful and they've inserted themselves into German society and have made us weaker as a society. And they're vermin. And they're disease. They're nothing but rats. All powerful and vermin. So, this idea of Jews are capitalists and they're communists, right? They're peasants and they're multimillionaires. They pull the levers of power and they're nothings, nobodies, easily to be killed, right? Jews have always been, blamed on either extreme. There's always a reason to hate Jews. That's why I think 10.7 just introduced a way that could be described as a moral basis for hating Jews. We know that they're not using blood of children to make matzah, but we think that they're harvesting the organs of Palestinians. And we also think that they're maiming little children, deliberately poisoning water, maiming them. So, now the difference is, if you told a villager about the matzah thing, they might believe it. But it was very easy. I don't know if you know this, scholar at Rutgers who wrote the book. I don't think I mentioned it before on your show, but maybe The Right to Maim. She won a book award. I don't remember her name. I don't want to know the name. I can assure your audience that if you bought the book, it's not in English. It's like there's not like one English sentence. You wouldn't understand a word she said. But she won a book award, and she receives standing ovations for a book called The Right to Maim. And in the book, she says, Israel mines the organs of Palestinians. They poison the water, and they deliberately maim the children. And if you look at the source material, there's no sources for it. So when she was confronted about the sources, she said, it's essentially true. Now, when did scholars say things like that? I don't have to give footnotes. I don't need to give endnotes. I don't need to provide my source material. All I know is that Palestinians have been persecuted by Jews. And however I want to describe the persecution, I'm allowed to do it. Yeah, but you're a professor. You're supposed to be an academic, a scholar in the search of truth. And now you're saying to us, I have no obligations to truth. I just have to tell a story in the way that I'd like to tell it. And the way I'd like to tell it is that Jews poison wells and Jews maim children and they harvest organs. So, this is what you're up against. All I would say is this material, the anti-Israel material, has been on syllabi for decades.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm hoping that it'll always be on decades, and there'll be more people. Like, I'm hoping my book, even though bookstores refuse to sell it, it's still there, and it'll always be serving as a bulwark against all the lies and all the nonsense about war crimes or genocide or apartheid, all the stuff about violations of international humanitarian law, violations of the laws of armed conflict, violations of the laws of the law of war manual. Well, my book responds in very strong detail, and as long as it's available, all I'm saying is, I'm sure there will come a time like the 1990s. The 1990s is when you probably saw Wiesel. I'm telling you that in the last years of his life, he did not agree with what he said to you. I told you this on your show the last time. I understand you saw him in the 90s, and I know that he believed that then, because if you had a pulse in the 1990s, you'd say every documentary that's awarded the Academy Award is a Holocaust documentary for 9 years in a row. Schindler's List is the most decorated of all films. Everyone feels like it's obligatory. Every public school in the country has a 3-week course on the Holocaust. There's all kinds of books, survivor testimonies through the Fortunov archives at Yale, or the Shoah foundations at University of Southern Cal. There was an absolute explosion of Holocaust literature, both journalistic, historical, political science, memoiristic, novelistic, filmic, documentarian. And you would say that would be the inoculant, that would be the bullet. And it wasn't, because if it was, you wouldn't be talking about Holocaust denial today. So, I, in those days, I'm not saying to my credit, I wrote negatively about all those films because I saw them as ultimately trivializing. I saw those films as trivializing, that they made it ordinary instead of extraordinary. And I saw a danger in that. I also saw a danger is if everyone is talking about it, eventually no one will talk about it, and they'll think, oh, well, that was a cliche or something. Instead of treating it as more sacred, it became something that was a household thing. Every idiot at a cocktail party said the word Holocaust as if he, the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. was a harder ticket to get than Universal Studios in Los Angeles, right? You couldn't get a ticket for years. It would take years to get it. So I thought, wow, that's extraordinary. If you looked at it logically, you'd say there'll never be genocide again. But there was a genocide in Bosnia happening at the same time. And 3 or 4 years later, there was a genocide in Rwanda happening.
Yeah.
Right. And so it was and then the Congo genocide never ended with 6 million Congolese.
And Sudan today.
And Sudan today, and the Mayan genocide, right?
Yeah.
So, so I don't think it was a magic bullet. It wasn't a prescription against, and the fact that you're telling me that look at all this erasure only proves. So I'm saying, I believe, Shana, I may not be alive to see it, probably won't, but there will be another decade in which there will be more truth and more of a calm reconciliation of what was actually happening in Gaza and how the world went on fire. And there will come a time, history always swings back. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a 10-year period in which people look stupid. And then they'll come right back to where they are now.
I hope you're right. I strongly disagree. Because again, I believe that the whole Islamist goal was to discredit the Jews, to destroy the Jewish people, and then they'll move on to the Christians. Now that they have the internet on their side, they're not going to let go of this momentum. And
well, that only means you're only right, Shana, if Islam gets what it wants. If Europe survives, then I'm going to be right. If Canada survives and Australia survives and the United States survives, if you're right, you're absolutely right. Everything all those books, my book will be disappeared. All of that will disappear because there'll be global domination of Islam. Mm-hmm. But if European culture wins back Europe, if American culture beats back Dearborn, Michigan, if the Canadians can get their act together and take Toronto back from Islamists and Montreal back from Islamists, then I do think that there will become a reconciliation of people seeing, God, we lost our minds. But you're right, the way it's going now, when the first flag lit up in Dearborn, Death to America, I said, oh shit, it's happening here. So, if we start seeing beheadings in the United States with excuses from Ben Affleck that it's Islamophobic to complain about beheadings in the United States, we're in deeper trouble. But because I'm saying, remember, after the Holocaust, the West won. Mm-hmm. Japan was defeated. Germany was defeated. Universities came back to normal. Right. So I'm saying, remember what happened, right? You're describing a situation where the Nazis would have won. The fact that they didn't win. And what did we have? The Nuremberg trials, the Tokyo trials, the re-education of Germany, the re-education of Japan. Why is there 1 or 2 planks in Donald Trump's Gaza peace proposal of the 20-point plan that use the word re-education? That's the reason, because he or his negotiators understood that World War II, the fanaticism, the madness, the annihilationist impulse would have continued had we not re-educated the public. Muslims need to be re-educated that you don't slit throats and behead people. Can they? Will they? I don't know.
Okay, Thane, a few things. One is that there's this vague talk, and I know it's one of the points of the plan. The plan has already been thrown out the window, okay? We don't have our hostages back. Hamas is saying, in no uncertain terms, they're not going to de-radicalize. They're not going to step back. They are taking control and nominating the people for this supposed peace force that's going to have some sort of Palestinian input. So I don't want to rely too much on this completely false document that we're calling a peace plan. Yes, there's a nod to de-radicalization and re-education, but at the same time, there's a lot of talk about, well, you can't actually do that. What happened with the Third Reich was that they not only removed the entire Reich, which nobody is willing to do, but then they bombed the crap out of Dresden, right? Just flattened the place, right? And not to mention what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These are all lines that nobody is willing to cross anymore. And as far as I'm concerned,
No, I think you're right. That's why I said you're
like,
saying that Islam is going to win.
They are winning because you keep using the concept of beheading. But if I could just replace that with, our society seems completely unfazed and even raising funds to defend murderers in our streets. Okay, so they didn't cut off their heads, but they shot them in the head. We were talking before the show about this Jewish man whose only crime was wearing a kippah, who got the shit beaten out of him the other day from, I assume, a Muslim. Of course, they're not revealing his identity, or if they have, I haven't seen it. And what does everybody, all the bystanders, do? If you watch the video, they all just sort of like, they go, oh, and then they just walk by. Okay, so I think that my argument compared to your argument is that we are lost, that we are going down a rabbit hole, that this stuff is becoming normalized. And I mean, ironically, like, if you go to Google, okay, and you search for anything having to do directly or indirectly, anything having to do with October 7th or the war that followed, you're going to see that even our search engines, they're supposed to be so objective and factual and in scrubbing the internet for all the information, they have been whitewashed to this polished, like, Islamic sheen. Even if, because there are people in Israel who are already scrambling to document 10/7 the way that Spielberg, who used to care about the Jews, did with the Shoah. But even if we have the most comprehensive record possible, what weight is it going to carry if we have nothing to back it up? On the internet, so first of all, there was very little like visual documentation of gang rapes and beheadings, because as you're being beheaded, you're not generally videotaping it. And also, like, if you ever listen to the guys from Zaka talking, I mean, these people were literally picking up body parts under fire. There are terrorists firing, but because they want to give them the dignity of a 24-hour burial, they're scraping blood off the floor, even as bullets are flying everywhere, and people are like, show me the dead babies. And they're like, we weren't taking pictures. We're cleaning up body parts. We're trying to save lives. And so you go online, like, I'll look for something that I know existed. Like the video of the man who was beheaded with a hoe in his kitchen. Okay, I saw it with my own two eyes. I saw it repeatedly. Go on Google, type in as many descriptive words as you can to try to find that video. It's gone. You have to look for somebody who posted it at some time on Twitter, even though it's all hidden as sensitive content. You have to click on every sensitive content to even find it. So I just don't understand. I just don't know how. I hope you're right. Thane, if I had $1 for every time that I said, I hope I'm wrong, but I'm never wrong. But I hope that there's a decade of reconciliation in understanding, like, how remiss the world has been.
I don't think you realize the amount of counter protests in the UK that there have been in the last month, right? People are, I think there's going to reach a point, a tipping point, where the West is going to have enough of Islam. They're going to have enough of the importation of these medieval barbaric practices, this unwillingness to embrace democratic liberalism and representative democracy, this fixation, obsession with Sharia law. You know, the French have faced it longer, but I believe we are reaching a point. Now, if we don't reach that point, then you're right. There will be nothing as a bulwark against it, and there will be a caliphate around the entire world, and we will all be forced to convert to Islam, because that's what you're saying. You're saying that I don't see this stopping. I only seeing it getting worse. I'm saying, well, then there's an end point. The Islamists know what the end point is. The end point is world domination, conquest, Islam being spread around the globe to fulfill the wishes of Allah and Muhammad. So I'm just saying, I'm hoping there is coming a point where the effect on Westerners doesn't just affect Jews, that Westerners are seeing, wait a minute, this is not just about Jews, this is about us. First, they came for the Jews, and now they're coming for us. They don't like our courts. They don't like the way our women dress. They're harassing our women. They believe in things that are medieval, and we're not going to live with that. There may come a protest from 40% of the people from Dearborn, like that reverend or that minister who's going, did you hear what just happened? He was told that he has to leave and they'll throw a parade. I'm hoping that 40% of the people in Dearborn are freaking out. What did we do? We just gave up our city, and our city is now like a little Tehran. And so if I'm not right and you're right, yes, nothing will change. It will only get worse. But I'm hoping that the Western world was comfortable capitulating to Islam as long as the targets were Jews. If the targets were local British Jews, I don't give a shit. If the target are Israelis, I don't give a shit. But if the target are my kids and what my kids learn at school and what my wife has to wear in order to walk out and be not harassed, that's not okay. This is England. This is not their country. We let you in here. So I don't know. I've been watching on Instagram and other places counter proposals where people are doing something that's unthinkable. Yeah. They're holding up the Union Jack. They're saying,
and they're getting arrested for it. So does it matter what the people are doing if the government refuses to acknowledge
the labor? I don't know if you read, Netanyahu decided just a few days ago to cut off England from all counterintelligence, all access to technology. We're telling British students to get the hell out, go back. You are not our ally. You are not a democratic ally. You've proven it. Immediately, the polls showed that Starmer's polling was now in the low teens, and the conservatives were polling nearly at 60%. I'm hoping that Starmer's government will fold. I'm hoping that there will be an effect to this, that he, in order to placate radical Islam, extremists in his own country, people who he's afraid would blow themselves up in front of Downing Street, his address, in a heartbeat. They don't give a shit. Blowing yourselves up is a hobby for us. And he doesn't, and he's worried about that.
Yeah.
And the fact that he has a Jewish wife means nothing to him. And he decided in order to maintain his power in the party and his placating Muslims from blowing up tubes in the tube stations, he will sell out Israel and acknowledge in a Palestinian state. But now, if it means that he has no security against, there was a person who went on BBC the other day who said, my daughter was supposed to be the subject of a kidnapping attempt, but it was thwarted because of Israeli Mossad intelligence.
Yeah.
And now there is darkness over the UK because without Israel's technology, they have no way to anticipate the next threat. And I'm hoping, again, I'm often wrong, I'm hoping that Starmer is going to have to call for elections. There'll be no confidence votes. And so I'm hoping that the people of France are saying, we're sick of the no-go zones. We're sick of this. We're sick of the Sharia courts. We're just sick of it, and we're not tolerating any more of it. And so, but if I'm wrong, then you're absolutely right, that the denials will get worse, and the spreading of Islam will get worse, and the West is finished. Not just Israel. Israel may be the one remaining democracy.
Yeah.
You're going to see Christians from England and Brussels and Sweden moving to Israel because they want to live in a democratic society.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, agree that you're saying you hope that it's not true, but I actually do believe that Israel will be the last democracy standing because it will be the only one that will be impervious to, because let's be honest, the Muslims aren't going to be ejected, even if something changes sociologically. And as you said, history, like in America, we're not always going to have a Republican president. At some point, it's going to be a Democrat. At this point, it looks more and more like a democratic socialist. And so you wait it out until the time is right, and then boom, you're back in. But I know we're closing in on an hour and a half, and I know I always take way too much of your time. A point I do want to make, though, Thane, that worries me a lot is after the Charlie Kirk assassination, most of the rhetoric that I'm hearing coming out of that group, not necessarily like the world at large, but it's a big group, has been unsettlingly Christian rather than Judeo-Christian in nature. I mean, I don't know if you listened to J.D. Vance yesterday at the Old Miss
I did.
event.
I saw the boy that talked about wondering why we support Israel's war in Gaza.
So the way that questions were asked, but also the way that they were,
I was very upset how Vance handled that.
It left me feeling physically ill. And then
I've never trusted Vance. No, and now I really don't trust him.
But he also hemmed and hawed about having Christian prayer in public schools. But so
I don't give a shit about that. I don't care about that. I really don't. That stuff. I am. To me, Islam is the real problem. It's not Christian prayer in school.
Okay.
If Donald Trump will continue to fight back and beat back against Islamists, you can have Christian prayers in schools, and Jews can sit there quietly. If they're going to defend Israel, people say to me all the time, I can't believe you wrote something that was favorable to Trump. Don't you realize he doesn't really care about Jews? He only cares about himself. I always say, I don't give a shit who he cares about. I care about who he's defending. If he wants a hotel in Gaza out of this, take 2 hotels. It means nothing to me. If you're going to protect Israel the way you do, in my view, you deserve 2 hotels. So I don't need to hear what people's motivations are. No one's motivations are clean.
But Thane, that's not. I actually agree with you, and I've written about the same. That's not really the point that I'm trying to make. The point that I'm trying to make is that we have this red-green Islamist alliance all the way across the left. And by the left, I mean the center doesn't even exist anymore. The center has become so far right. But we have these Christian crusaders that are rising on the far right. And the Tucker Carlsons and in the what's that Hispanic guy? I can't even remember his name because Candace Owens.
I know
and all the people. So I mean, people are talking about this horseshoe. I don't even see it as a horseshoe. I see it as a pincher, and it seems perfectly poised to squeeze the Jews out all together.
Look,
hold on.
Okay,
because I just want to finish my thought really quickly. Is that like our nation? I mean, I could argue the world, but our nation is so extraordinarily polarized right now that the right and the left agree on nothing. But it sure seems that Jew hatred is the thing that might ultimately reunite them. That is why I believe that this not Judeo-Christian, because I agree with you. Islamists are by far and away no competition, the biggest threat to America. I do not see Christians as a threat to me in any way, but I do see Christian crusaders who are writing on my wall that Jesus Christ is the only Lord and Savior, and it is the only way. And, God, save your soul, Jew. That I do see a problem with that. Instead of it being us versus them, it's everyone versus the Jews.
I just don't see a critical mass. Maybe it's because
Turning Point?
The vast majority of people from Turning Point do not have anti-Israeli, anti-Jewish feelings. No, that's not true. I don't. There's no evidence to that. I didn't like what he said, but it did not sound like that was a Nazi rally. It did not sound. I'm sure that if Vance had said what I wanted him to say, that Israel is a democratic ally and the only ally that we can trust in that region. It's the only place where people like you guys can hold hands and dress the way you want and listen to the kind of music you want and practice anything you want. it's the only free society and we're always going to stand with them, he would have gotten a thunderous row of applause. He didn't do it.
Yes,
and
but
that's
I'm not
because
saying
he's from Appalachia, and I think he's got real creepy anti-Semitic feelings.
But Thane, hold on. You're sort of putting words into my mouth or not hearing what I'm saying.
No, I'm just saying I can't take what you're saying seriously because my house is on fire with Islamists and academics and Marxists, and that's a critical mass. And what you're talking about to me just seems, that's there. It's there.
Again, but you said the word, you don't see them as anti-Semitic. I don't see them as anti-Semitic. I don't even necessarily see them as anti-Israel. But what I'm saying is, Thane, America was founded on Judeo-Christian values. Not even our forefathers would disagree with that fact. This is not a Christian nation. And if we get pushed into the same Christian corner as the Middle East is being pushed into an Islamic corner, I don't know where the place is for the Jews, is what I'm saying.
We spent 200 years in the United States in what many people would describe as a Christian country, and Jews have thrived. What are you talking about? This was, if you asked most Americans throughout our history, including our founding fathers, they would say this is a Christian nation, but we have practiced religious pluralism. So I don't have a problem with people calling this a Christian nation. Look at what Jews have done in several generations in this country, living in a Christian country. No one has forced Jews to convert. This is not like an Islamist society. This is not where conversion has been, if that's what you're hearing out of Turning Point, if you're hearing that, I'm worried. But until you tell me that's what they're talking about, because the fact that they're calling America a Christian country, I'm perfectly comfortable saying, yeah, you're right. Can we still live in freedom? Is this still a liberal democracy? If this is still a liberal democracy, Jews will kick ass and will be safe. If this will still be a society in which we respect the rule of law and not Sharia law, we're going to be okay. If we're still devoted to the Constitution, we're good. We're good. The minute we go off book and we're now going into Sharia law or Christian theology, if that's what Turning Point is saying, I missed it and I'm against them. But right now, I do not see that. I see a very serious tsunami of Marxist university. As I said before, the problem is I come from universities and mainstream media. So I've been watching something serious. I don't look at Nick Fuentes. That's who you meant. I don't look at him. I look at him as about as stupid as the left-wing guy who wrote You and Yoga. Both of them should go bowling. They're both idiots. But I don't think either of them, I'm more worried about the yoga guy than I am about Nick Fuentes. And that's why I said critical mass. The day that you see what you think is a critical mass, you can invite me back and I will say, Shana, I've always said I'm often wrong. And
But how many followers does Tucker Carlson have? How many followers does Candace Owens have? How many followers does Nick Fuentes have?
I don't think that means that.
How many times has Joe Rogan made comments that are intentionally or unintentionally blatantly anti-Semitic? I mean, this is mainstream. And again, I'm not arguing with you that,
I understand.
That Islamism is 120 million% the biggest threat that not just we as Jews, but the whole nation is facing.
I don't convinced that whatever millions Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens have, it's not clear to me that there's a million anti-Semites. It's just not obvious to me. I thought that Tucker Carlson was anti-Semitic at Fox. I didn't like the fact that he was promoting J.D. Vance so much when he was running for Senate. That made me worry about J.D. Vance. I figure, so if you're Tucker's guy, there's a problem with you. And I never liked J.D. Vance for that reason, because you were on Tucker. So I saw Tucker Carlson as a first-tier anti-Semite then. And so I'm not surprised that he's done well for himself. But it's not obvious to me that everyone that follows him believes that Israel should be destroyed. It's not obvious to me that they don't see Israel as an ally. They may say, like Vance or other Republicans, maybe we should reduce our our military commitment to Israel. They maybe can. And then what could happen? Israel might reduce our intelligence sharing with them.
Yeah.
And we'll see how you like that, because now the United Kingdom is in trouble. So it goes both ways.
Do you think it puts the Jews
he
of
could
the
have
United
said that.
Kingdom
He could have, if Vance was more, if he was more intellectually honest last night and less in, an attempt to say all the right words to Christian leaning people, he would have said, we benefit just as much from Israel's intelligence and having them in that part of the world as a regional power to stabilize that region. We benefit just as much, if not more, than the stupid $3 billion we give them in aid. We give a lot more aid to other places, other things. $3 billion is peanuts for what we get back. That's what he should have said. He's not stupid. He could have said it, but he and Tucker Carlson don't like that. They don't like about what Israel gives them back. They just like the isolationist stance. America first, we don't involve ourselves in other things. Okay, but I don't believe that means that even Vance doesn't believe that America benefits from Israel being a partner in that region. And I just think that's very different from what Tucker wants to do, or what Nick Fuentes would want to do, or what Kanye West would want to do. It doesn't bother me that Kanye West says stupid things and he has mental problems. It doesn't make me think that his listeners to his music all of a sudden want Israel destroyed. What I do know, it's the idiots on campuses that do, not the people that aren't on campuses that are listening to Kanye West. I'm more worried about the person walking away with a BA in gender studies. That's what I'm worried about. I'm not worried about Kanye West's listener who didn't graduate high school. And until I see that side having the kind of critical mass and spittle dribble hatred of Jews, the way what we're seeing, genocide, you're killing Jewish babies, what we're seeing on the streets and on campuses, at Christmas tree lighting ceremonies, the madness, the craziness, we're not seeing that yet. We're seeing a lot of people, we're seeing right-wing people that have isolationist opinions and say things that are not favorable to Jews and in some ways disparaging of the Holocaust with millions of social media followers. You know what? There's 350 million people in the United States. They're going to follow. There's a lot of people to follow.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Fun.
I just want to be super amazingly double, triple, quadruple times clear
Get the last word.
That in no way do I think that the Christians are enemies of the Jews. In no way, shape, or form.
Good.
All I'm saying is that there is a far right movement that is nationalist, Christian, chauvinistic in nature, that is that I see as dangerous in finding common cause in anti-Semitism with the left.
Because I do this every day, unfortunately, and I've been involved in these circles every day. What you're saying now, I get very scared. I find what you're saying very dangerous. Why? Because if Shana's podcast is saying this too, what you've said is the excuse I hear all the time when they say, look what you're saying about Muslims and Islamists and Palestinians. Don't you know it's on the right wing too? Don't you know the same thing is there? When I hear you say that, I'm saying you're only helping them out. You're just helping them out. You're saying, there's bad people everywhere. No, they're not. The real bad people are cutting off heads right now and gang raping. And until you show me Turning Point kids gang raping Jews and girls and beheading and throwing Jewish babies in ovens, I don't like this talk at all, because it only empowers people that I know say this to me every day. What about Nick Fuentes? What about Tucker? And I'm looking, are you kidding me? Are you shitting me? Your house is on fire and you want to talk about Tucker Carlson? So anyway, that just worries me because it creates the relativism that makes it seem like it's equal, and it's so not equal.
It's not equal. And I actually wrote a whole Substack about it not being equal.
Keep doing that.
But Thane, hold on. What I'm saying is, and I'll just say it again, because I know that sometimes it's not said clearly, the entire left and the center has moved so far that it's the entire left, as far as I'm concerned, because I know so many of them have been intoxicated with Jew hatred, but so has the far right. So I'm talking about a far right fringe.
I understand.
But so it's not an equation, because I'm talking about 90%
But what you're saying
of the
was always
left
true. There was
and
always a
5%
far
of
right,
the right.
but there was always a far right. So it's not like we have a new
I
thing called the far right. There was always a
no,
far right that hated Jews. There were
I
far right parties. Le Pen's father
right.
was far right in France. So I'm saying we're not saying
Sure.
anything different. What's different, significantly different, is the critical mass, this explosion
100%.
of Marxism and Islamism. That's what's really different. The fact that there's a fringe on the right, yeah, I know. We've always seen that. There was always
Yeah.
there. The question, I'll say it again, until you show me that they have the numbers and the energy and the hatred and the actions and the conduct of anti-Jewish behavior, until you show me that. Some idiot kid yesterday in Memphis who asks a question that could have been answered very easily if you'd have given it to me, Vance, I would have handled it. And I believe in my heart that if I was given a chance to answer it, it would have gotten a thunderous applause. I would have said, this is what I would have said. Someone else that night said, and I was surprised. I wasn't surprised, but it upset me that Vance didn't say it. He said the Church of the Sepulchre. Do you remember that? And what he didn't say, what he should have said was, when Jerusalem was occupied by the Jordanians for 17 or 19 years, I can't remember, 1949 to, I guess it's 19 years. 19 years, the Church of the Sepulchre was turned into a toilet. And the only country that restored it, put it back, and protects it are the Jews. That's all he needed to say. When the Arabs had it, they pissed in it. Jesus's birth, all of that whole area was treated like a toilet. It meant nothing to them. But Israel has been defending all three major religions. That's what Vance should have said. Instead of mentioning that, what he said, he did not defend Israel. He did not tell you the dangers of what happens when you put Muslims in charge.
Agree. And again, I definitely am not drawing any equations.
I know.
I just again, I also raise flags when 3 idiots were elected to the House, AOC and Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. And I raised this flag with everyone I knew at AIPAC, and all they kept saying, it's only 3 people. It's only 3 people. So I just, and again,
yeah, but they were progressives and Islamists,
yes,
who had the ear of universities and mainstream media.
Right. But again, what I'm saying is I raised these flags when everybody said, shut up, Shana, this is such a small thing. Just like BDS, as I said before, that I raised the flag and I was told, sit down, it's not a problem. I just I don't worry about it in the moment. I worry about I actually don't worry about Christians killing Jews. I don't see it in that way, but I see us being squeezed out of society in a way where we're no longer accepted as a valuable piece of the American tapestry or the European tapestry or the Australian tapestry or the Canadian tapestry, or go down the tapestries. We're just being cut right out of them.
Yeah. I don't, all I know is that I don't think that Christian Americans looking at this think they have anything to fear from Jews. I think that they can see what's happening in Arab societies and fear that. But just like the buyer's remorse that's taking place throughout Europe, I think most Europeans who are Christians are saying, we don't have anything against Jews. Jews don't blow themselves up. Jews have not imposed Talmudic laws on us. Jews don't harass our women and tell them they have to dress in a certain way. Okay. Jews don't behead people. Just give people the, and I believe that if I'd said that last night at Turning Point, they would have said, yes, he's right. And tell the kid who has some problem with defending Israel to take a hike and get in his car and drive back to wherever he came from, because he doesn't understand geopolitics and he doesn't really understand where the real threats lie.
He still did get a lot of applause.
I agree.
So
he did. I was surprised, but that was only because there was no rebuttal.
yeah,
I think that there was no chance to rebut him. And that
yeah,
was, and I'm glad that you picked up on that. I didn't read anyone else saying that, but I thought
yeah.
that was a very disappointing moment
There were a
and
few
made me
though,
not
but
trust Vance.
yeah, but it also goes beyond the Jews. I mean, his answers about immigration were unsettling. It again, the prayer thing was unsettling, but I mean, just everything he said, I was like, like I'm just like I guess like I'm like, oh
Yeah,
God,
because he was talking to a
2028.
Christian audience. I don't
Okay,
have a problem with that.
okay,
He was
okay,
talking to a
cool,
Christian audience, and he told the Christian audience what he wanted to hear. But
okay.
he, and when he talks to synagogues, he probably says a lot of things different when he's talking to Jews.
I wonder, yeah,
I have to assume he says something different.
based on the things that he said about the like Hamas murder of IDF soldiers and also things that he said when he was in Israel last week. I don't know that he's saying anything much different in public. Maybe
I already told
slightly.
you I
Yeah.
didn't want him as my vice president.
Yeah.
I do not like I start from the very beginning. If
Yeah.
Tucker Carlson was your main donor and patron, we have a problem. You come from a weird space of isolationism and a mistrust of neoconservatism, which is very much identified with Jewish intellectuals.
Who's your dream ticket for 2028 on both sides?
I don't know of anybody. I'm hoping there's somebody I don't know of.
You don't like Marco Rubio?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, both sides. I thought you were being Democrat. No, I love Rubio. I had wished that Rubio was picked as vice president.
Yeah, I like Rubio, Tom Cotton, Ted Cruz, all of the
Yeah.
guys.
And that's why I'm not worried. I don't think the Trump administration or the Republican Party, to me, is validly pro-Israel. Lindsey Graham, they
Yeah.
are more pro-Israel than Steve Witkoff. I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah. Well, what happens if Mamdani wins? What happens for AOC's political future?
She's the next senator of New York. I mean,
You don't think she could run for president?
she could, but
I mean, I know she could run for president. You don't think she could win for president?
I'll say it again. I don't know. I know that there is violence on the left, the Marxist and Islamist left. And I don't know whether that violence would erupt in her favor. But I think that the majority of Americans do not see AOC as their president.
Yeah.
I understand that a majority nowadays of Democrats do. I'm sorry to say that. It's why we need a third party. But I don't think that most Americans, I think most Americans, Donald Trump won convincingly.
Yeah.
And I think that a coalition like a Trump ticket will win convincingly if all the Democrats have to offer is AOC. If that's the best they have is Bernie Sanders and AOC, I'm pretty sure the Republicans will win again.
I hope you're right. I look at the world and it just scares the crap out of me.
I know. I'm in that same world. I'm with you.
But you sound a lot more optimistic than I do, though, because I think you think that this is going to course correct, and I hope it does, and it always has in the past. I don't.
I can't believe the West is going to put burqas on their people. I don't believe.
Is that the line? Is that the?
I think we're headed towards a spot. What we're seeing in front. Yes, if there are Sharia courts, I happen to think where we reach a point where there's hundreds of Sharia courts in the United States, I am assuming we are headed to a civil war.
But you think so? When I say do you think that that's the line? Like, do you think that the status quo as we see it today is acceptable if we're not wearing burqas?
No, but I'm saying that the status quo is not okay to Islamists. This is not good for them.
Okay.
This is bullshit. They see Americans not wearing clothes. They see pornographic movies. They see people not being, Jews and Christians. They're infidels. This is not good for them. If you listen to what's going on in a mosque, they're not happy. They think they're on the way to being happy, but this is not good. If they stopped here, this is not a victory. It's a defeat for us where they stop here. But I'm pretty confident they don't want to stop here. They're moving forward. They've got more things to do, more will to impose on the West.
Okay. I hope that when the will is imposed, the West wakes up.
Yes, I hope that that's what I'm counting. I'm counting for the French, the Swedish, the Belge, the
Belge?
Belgium,
Yeah.
the Belge. I'm hoping that they will
Yeah.
say, this is not what we had in mind. And
Yeah.
Poland and Hungary are in much better state because of
Yeah.
that. They simply
Yeah.
let no one in. And look what happened. They don't have crime. They don't have graffiti. They don't have this kind of, fascistic religious fanaticism. They don't have that.
Yeah.
They're just
Yeah.
Catholics.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Well, as an
That was
author,
fun,
thank
as
you
always.
for finishing off with
Thanks
a
for giving
happy
me
ending.
a trilogy.
Thanks for joining
Thanks,
me.
Shana.
And I'm Yisrael Chai, as always.